Thank you all for coming. Like Dr. Thompson said, I am an MSW candidate. I'm in my second year of the program. And also, I am an amateur maker. I belong to a maker community. And in this community, we work on learning about and putting to use new technologies, especially affordable ones. And so what I'm going to talk about today is how you can take these technologies and you can implement them in human service organizations in order to empower women. So I'm going to be talking about 3D printing, Raspberry Pi computing, BeagleBone technology, and the possible practical application for MOOCs, which are massive open online courses. And the reason these technologies are relevant to empowering women are we're in the midst right now of a technological revolution. Excluding biology, women are heavily underrepresented in all STEM fields right now. These technologies are becoming more affordable, and they are allowing access to women from all social classes and women in various living situations. These technologies can be utilized within many agencies. And girls and women of all ages can benefit from these and knowing how to use them, from children to the elderly. And here's a graph just to show you the disparity right now. As you can see, biological sciences are about even, but after that it drops off to a third for chemists and material scientists as far as women are concerned, all the way down to 7 or 6% for electrical and mechanical engineers. So there is still a huge disparity. And this graph is from 2010, but these numbers have remained flat for the last 3 or 4 years. Now, examples of agencies that you can implement this technology in are domestic violence shelters for women, substance abuse residency programs that are designed for women specifically, homeless shelters, transitional housing for women and children, day centers for those experiencing homelessness, day centers for senior citizens and other eligible individuals, and women who are institutionalized in settings such as juvenile hall and prison systems. Okay, the first one I want to talk about is 3D printing. And essentially, I'm going to conceptualize that in this way, which is it's an additive manufacturing technique that creates an object by laying down small layers of a material down in the shape of that object. Now, most home 3D printers use plastic filament, while some use a liquid resin, and some commercial 3D printers can produce metal parts. And 3D printers can be very useful for prototyping, which is essentially making an item to a specific shape and design, and then from there you could kind of mass produce it or use it in its unique form. And there are 3 main types of 3D printers. A fused deposition modeling printer, which uses filament as the material, a stereolithography, and that uses resin, and selective lasering sintering. Now, why would you want to learn how to use a 3D printer? Well, as an individual or a group, you can make all kinds of objects with 3D printers that can be useful for many things, from hobbying to practical applications in your house. There's a website called thingiverse.com, and they have over 100,000 downloadable models currently that you can download and print yourself without even having to create a new model. The number of materials 3D printers can use is growing, and this will most likely allow for long-term growth in the manufacturing industry over the coming years. 3D printers can be empowering due to open source design and crowdfunding. And what that means is if something is open source, that you can use that item for free, and you can modify it as long as you give credit to the original designer for their part of the work. And crowdfunding means if you have an idea for building your own 3D printer, or you want to get one that's really good and you want to get it out there for people to use, you can use forums like Kickstarter or GoFundMe in order to acquire funding to do so. And 3D printing has applications in several employment industries like healthcare, home crafting like ETSU, the defense industry, and education, and of course manufacturing. Now, in 2009, MakerBot made the Thingomatic, and I actually own this printer and bought it in 2009, and it was $1,300 at the time, and it was 4x4x4 build volume with a 250 micron resolution. And essentially, micron is the level of thickness that the material comes together with, and the lower your micron resolution, the better. And this printer uses a plastic filament. And so this printer is obviously very expensive. It really can't do a lot. But in 2013, they developed the Castle, which is $600, and it's 9x9x9. It has 50 micron resolution and uses plastic filament, and it automatically homes and levels the print bed, which means it gets everything in line for you and ready to go, and you don't have to do that yourself. So as you can see, they're getting better and more affordable as the years go by. This year, the Peachy was released. It's a 2014, and it's $100. It has 20 micron resolution, but it should get better. And it theoretically could print a house. It uses resin solution, and resin is a liquid that hardens under certain conditions like UV rays and heat. And there's no need for homing or bed leveling with this printer, and it can also be used to scan 3D objects. So this printer is $100. It just came out this year. I actually have ordered this, and I should be getting one in the next month or so. So it's becoming more affordable. We wanted to try out some technology groups to see how they do and how different groups react to those. So I will be doing a technology group at the Program of All-Inclusive Care for the Elderly in Big Stone Gap, Virginia, and it'll be a 3D printing educational group. It'll last for 8 weeks. There'll be 10 participants, and basically I'll be teaching them how to download and print objects for crafting and artistic purposes, really to just kind of see how the elderly do with this technology and let them see all the different ways you can craft and whatnot with it. If you want to learn kind of how to download your own objects, design them and print them, you can go to tinkercad.com, and this website is free, and it has like a tutorial that shows you how to do this and how to print the objects you want. And Autodesk Inventor, which is free to students. And Autodesk Inventor, it just really allows you to design whatever you would like. Okay, the Raspberry Pi was developed in 2011, and it's essentially a credit card sized computer, and it connects to your home TV and can be used to control electronics. And basically the Raspberry Pi is designed to help people learn to program and how computers work. And it replaces the many functions of a larger computer. Now here, I'm just going to pass this around so you can kind of see how small it is. And basically this was designed so people with about a 3rd grade education, and at that level they could learn how to program through building blocks and Scratch and other methods and become more familiar with a computer. And for people who, there's like 20% of households still don't have a computer in their house, and so this is $35. It's affordable. It works just like a regular computer does, except it has a compiler in it, and you can do programs, and you can modify it to use it as a home entertainment center, among other things. This is just the anatomy of the Pi. I won't go over all that, but it just, it has an SD card, it uses transistors, it has an Ethernet port to hook it up to the internet, it has a phono out, so you have a speaker for sound, basically just like a regular computer. You can buy the board for $35, or you can buy a kit for $110. And essentially the kit comes with a book that walks you step by step through everything, and an SD card already downloaded with the operating system on it. So that's really good. It operates off of Linux, which is free. All the software on the system is free. And there are many documented projects online that can show you what all you can do with this computing software and the hardware too. Scratch is built into the Pi, and you can learn how to program through building blocks with that application. Linux, the operating system, is free. Linux has various versions of software: Debian, Ubuntu, Angstrom. It has LibreOffice, which is kind of similar to Microsoft Word, and it has a VLC media player. This isn't like a finished project, but this is 90% finished. This was a school project I did for a spirituality class that I took. And essentially, with a Raspberry Pi, I hooked it up to a television, and I made a kiosk. And once it was finished, I didn't need the mouse, and it had a cover. But you could essentially go up to the kiosk and press on a button, and it would take you through a narrative, or it would give you information about Buddhism. And it was just a really creative way to bring the Raspberry Pi into a classroom, just by using it as a kiosk. So that's just one way it could be used in a classroom. The BeagleBone Black was developed in 2012, and it's very similar to the Raspberry Pi, except for the fact that it has a video recognition system that allows it to do facial recognition. So essentially the same thing, basically with a facial recognition system added onto it, and it has more transistors. The cost for the BeagleBone is $45, $100 for the kit. You can see many documented projects for this online at beagleboard.com. And it comes with everything you need to start programming. One project that that's been done with the BeagleBone is the Project Smart Pill Box. And what this box is designed to do is to help remind those with dementia and others with difficulty remembering when to take their medication and what to take. It uses computer vision software to determine the person's identity, pill regimen, and ensure they are taking the medication on time. It uses open source software. And one of the applications that I've used the BeagleBone for was I made a facial recognition system because I have 2 dogs, and one of them has to eat a certain food and the other one has to eat another food. And so essentially, when they walk up and put their face up to the bowl, it will only open for the dog it's supposed to open for. And so it could be used for things like that. And I'll kind of pass around the BeagleBone too, in case anyone would like to look at it. Okay, the next thing I'm going to talk about is massive open online courses. Now MOOCs, they're free courses that many people around the world can enroll in together. Right now they're kind of controversial. They have low completion rates, and compared to initial enrollment rates, not many people are completing them for the people who are enrolling, maybe like a 10% rate of completion. It's a newer technology. The main providers right now are Coursera, Udacity, and edX. But what we want to know is where might they find their grounding in the years to come? And where we think they may land is through life enrichment, through information gain. In other words, just enhancing your knowledge for general purposes. For continuing education without formal recognition, this may be somebody who has a bachelor's degree who just needs to do some follow-up or a refresher in order to stay current and stay abreast of new knowledge. Those who are currently banned from receiving aid due to the fact that they may have got a drug conviction while they were receiving aid, this allows them to continue their education and skill building until they're able to secure further educational options. And the MOOCs may provide beneficial to women in state and federal prison systems who have very limited access to federal financial aid programs because, they do not qualify for student loans and many of the various grants. They do qualify for work study, but it's incredibly hard to make that work in the prison system. And there are now MOOCs that offer GED test preparation. Okay, some ethical considerations. When you're planning activities and introducing technologies, be aware of the level of functioning of the client, at the social, biological, and psychological level. If somebody has advanced Alzheimer's or something like that, they may not be able to participate in a Raspberry Pi technological group, and they may not even be able to kind of print objects. So, you just have to be on the lookout for that kind of thing. With 3D printing, the level of education needed really varies. You just have to have the ability to learn from visual and verbal direction, especially if you're just downloading objects and not modeling them yourself. For the Raspberry Pi, you need about a 3rd grade education. For the BeagleBone, you probably need to be a high school graduate. So the BeagleBone has some limitations that the Raspberry Pi does not have. And be sure to operate from a trauma-informed care framework whenever possible. For example, if you're going to have somebody coming into a domestic violence shelter, to teach women in a group how to use one of these technologies, make the women aware ahead of time that the person will be coming, and make sure the person isn't a batterer or something like that of one of the women living in the shelter. You know, just things like that. Make sure they sign a confidentiality form that they won't release any information about the clients that they're coming to help. And keep lessons based around the availability of the client. A lot of times when clients are living in human service organizations, they have other commitments they have to attend to, like NA meetings, AA meetings, support groups, mandatory counseling sessions. So it's just important to make sure that the times that you're holding these groups allow women to be able to attend if they'd like to. The program should be offered on a voluntary basis. We really don't want anybody involuntarily trying to learn this material if they really don't want to. Contingency management may be utilized to encourage participation. And essentially what that means is you might offer incentives to people that are at your HSO if they attend these groups and kind of show what they've learned, which may be an extended curfew. They may get a certain prize. That sometimes there's like gift shops in HSOs where they give out gifts, a weekend pass. These kinds of things are ways that you could essentially reward someone for participating, and that kind of just, you know, it's a positive thing. 2 one-hour meetings a week so other client obligations are not disturbed and the client doesn't become overwhelmed. Encourage women to include their children in the group when feasible to encourage shared learning experiences and bonding. Because a lot of times when women live in these HSOs, such as domestic violence shelters or substance abuse agencies, their children are generally with them a lot of times. And so this is a great way for children to learn how to use these technologies as well as the women. The groups can be facilitated by a social worker, a case manager, and various other helping professionals. A maker volunteer in your community, an electronics technician, and an electronic or mechanical engineer, computer programmer, or software engineer. It's not terribly hard to learn how to use these technologies, but if you simply don't have the time or not really your cup of tea, you can always connect with the community to find someone to come teach these to clients. Getting connected. You can network with the do-it-yourself or maker community to possibly connect with individuals willing to donate their time and resources. Right now, the Tri-Cities area does not have a formal meetup group. Hopefully that will change soon. Advertise on social media such as Facebook and Craigslist in order to acquire donations such as new and used 3D printers and Raspberry Pis. And contact companies such as MakerBot and Raspberry Pi in order to ask about donations for social service organizations. When possible, you can consider how you might acquire funds through grant monies. And just for your FYI, Asheville currently has a 3D Printers Guild meetup group. So there's a group in Asheville who's doing a lot with 3D printing. And some people from that group would possibly be willing to help out with that kind of thing. I'm a member of a group a couple hours away from here, and we are always more than willing to help and give lessons on these kind of technologies and stuff. So I know a lot of people are really willing to help with this. So, anybody have any questions for me?
The folks that you're going to have at Big Stone Gap, do you have some criteria for them? Do they have to know how to use a PC before they can get into your 3D group?
Well, what I did was I kind of made like a scale to kind of match everybody to a criteria. And for this first group, I require that they have at least a 10th grade education. Just to kind of, that's not necessarily required, but just to see where they are at that level. No major grief or depression going on right now, so not to kind of overwhelm them, and so they can kind of concentrate on what we're doing. And basically from their reassessments, make sure they have a general interest in crafting and whatnot. And we have 103 participants. So after I screened everyone for capabilities and education, I had 13 people who were eligible and 10 were very interested in doing it. And so that's how I came about forming the group for Big Stone Gap.
How many folks do they service?
They service 103 at the moment.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
And out of those you had 13?
Yes, ma'am, that were
Okay.
But the criteria could be larger if you take away that 10th grade education barrier, but I just decided it might be best to start there and see how that goes.
Okay.
Is there a way to keep up with that, like progress, or to see anything like that?
Well, what I'm going to do is, especially since the group's so small, and if you probably don't want to have a group of more than 15 people at once anyway, is over the 8-week period, kind of do qualitative interviews with each of the participants to see how they feel about the group, and I'm going to kind of monitor their progress and see how they do before implementing any more. So that's the hope right now, is that just do a qualitative interview to see how everybody feels about it and how they like it, since it's not really big enough to do a lot of quantitative stuff right now, of course. Anybody else have any questions?
I have a friend who runs a day center / shelter for homeless women, and they do everything from from washing their clothes to hair and nails to working on interview skills and finding resources in the community where they can start putting in their applications for jobs and that sort of things. So how would Raspberry Pi or BeagleBone, how could that be used in a day shelter for that particular group of women? I mean, just kind of off the top of your head.
Okay, so what Phyllis wants to know is how these technologies can be used in a day center. And what you could do is you could kind of survey the people attending the day center, and you can kind of ask them if they're interested in learning how to program computers, if they're interested in exploring making crafts or making various objects, learning how to use the technology. And once you know who's interested, you can kind of form a group off of that. Make sure everybody's, interested and they're all well suited for the group, because sometimes you may have an outlier where the person might be interested, but there may be criteria there that they wouldn't be suitable for that group. That happens at times. And so once you have your group formed, you just have a social worker or a volunteer come in and conduct a group once or twice a week with the participants. And these technologies can also be used to improve job prospects. It may be the difference in a manufacturing company and working in a shipping department, or making more working in an engineering department, because you don't have to be an engineer to do everything in the engineering department. And just simply knowing about these technologies should get you further in your job search. Any more questions?
How did you evolve with this? How did you? I know there are 3D printers.
Sure.
But I had no idea that they could be as small as you have shown us today, and that there were other applications for them other than manufacturing and engineering.
Well, I really like social work as a career, but as an amateur, I really like exploring new technologies and do-it-yourself movements. And so the do-it-yourself movement has really started to take off in the last few years. And so I got involved in a maker group, and every week or every other week we kind of meet and talk about new technologies. And we meet with the city council and ask how we can implement do-it-yourself and empowering things like this nature into the community. And in the community where I attend, we're trying to set up a do-it-yourself store right now where people can come in and have objects designed for how they like them, and then we could print them out. Or they can simply come in and learn how to 3D print and things like that. Maybe be there 2 nights a week in order to do that. So that's kind of where I kind of learned about it. And there's so many new technologies out now, but the reason I decided to talk about these technologies was because they're so cheap. And I know cheap is relative, but they're all right around $100 or less. And so people would be more likely to donate these, I believe. Funders would be more likely to buy one for an agency if they can see the practical applications and what all women can learn from them. Some places have 3D printers that are so large that they can print a new 3D printer out of that 3D printer, and then they could donate that one at minimal cost.
Say that again. A 3D printer that they can donate.
Right, from a big 3D printer, a big commercial one. They can print the parts for it on the big 3D printer and then put it together and then donate that to a shelter or an agency at minimal cost to them. And so that's one reason why 3D printing, I think in the next couple of years, will be a good candidate to be placed in these organizations. Because I don't know if any of y'all have ever worked in HSO, but a lot of times in the shelter and in substance abuse programs on the weekends, other than their grocery shopping, the women don't have a whole lot to do. And so what I've seen in my experience is they kind of sit around and watch movies and socialize for about 13, 14 hours a day on Saturday and Sunday. They have plenty to do during the week. So if we can take an hour or two of that time and get them together in kind of an educational group and getting them familiar with these new technologies and these MOOCs and whatnot, I think it could be really empowering, and it could really, improve life situations overall, especially for the children living in these facilities as well. And I think in areas like Big Stone Gap, with the elderly and whatnot, a couple years ago they did a program at PACE where we taught everybody how to use the internet. We had a lot of people that didn't know how to use the internet, and we have about a 20% illiteracy rate. And so by introducing these things and letting the participants see how they're used, we're kind of giving them a head start, because these technologies aren't even really mainstream yet. So instead of putting them behind the game this time, we're trying to put them ahead of the game. So that's kind of some of the goals that we have and some of the things we hope to do. Does anybody have any more questions?
How can I find some of the MOOCs programs, free education classes, to where I could possibly bring those to my field placement at my agency? So that the women there could use, could learn new skills and get some free education.
Yeah, you can go to Coursera, edX, or Udacity. They all three have a website, and you can search for what you're looking for. And they have anything from, GED courses all the way up to advanced computer science that you can utilize. And you can kind of look through and see when it's starting and what you want. And ETSU had partnered, TBR had been a partner in the MOOC system for a while. I'm not sure if they still are, but they were one of the participating schools. But yeah, you can go to any one of those websites, and there's just poetry, English, math, anything that you want to pick from. So, and kind of like I was saying, it's really good because not everybody is eligible for financial aid, and they don't have the means, to pay for school. And so until we can get them to that point, or until they become eligible again, this might be an alternative that kind of works in order to kind of build some skills and get some basic education. Anybody else have any questions?
Would you like to briefly, I didn't mention this earlier, but would you like to briefly talk about what you and Inga Sarkoti are doing with the Raspberry Pi for recruitment and orientations for women's studies?
Sure. If any of you all are coming to the Majors Fair in February, we will have a women's studies kiosk, and it'll be powered by the Raspberry Pi. And it's essentially a Raspberry Pi with the TV hooked up to it. And it'll operate as a kiosk where you can come up to the kiosk and you can get basic information about the Women's Studies program, our Honor Society, all the different things that we're doing in the program. And you can also watch video clips from some of our Women's Studies students and some of our past graduates, as well as myself talking about career options for Women's Studies. And it's really going to be interactive, and it'll have like a narrative option as well to kind of tell the story of Tri, Iota, and the three goddesses. And so I think that will be very neat, and Max will be featured in the video, so look for a clip of her for sure, and maybe you. So
It's already been videoed, and Dr. Malatino has already been videoed.
So
There's some more people who are getting ready to be videoed.
and so it will be nice and purple and pretty, and so look for that at the Majors Fair, and you'll kind of get to see the Raspberry Pi in action. So that'll be really neat. Any more questions? Would any of you all consider using this technology in a human service organization? Okay, great. And like I said, everything's still kind of in its infancy, but we really want to kind of keep people ahead of the game instead of behind the game. And so since we have people willing to donate televisions and VCRs and these other tools, coffee makers to these shelters, hopefully we can get, these other groups like these maker groups and engineers to really donate these other tools so we can kind of use these as educational tools to empower everyone. And like I said, there's so many more technologies, but these are really the cheapest ones right now with the most power, the most bang for their buck. So that's what we're going with for now. Any more questions?
Well, thank you very much. This has been great. I learned a lot.